Hi there, Randy Green here, and welcome to the Higher Order Systemic Energetic Awareness Forum, where I am here going to do a series of podcasts where I'm going to talk about the chakra system and Kundalini yoga. And why do I choose to put it here on the host forum, as I call it? I could call it Hosea, but I would easily get into trouble because Hosea is actually a Hebrew prophet. So therefore, I'm not just taking on that word and is calling it every here and there, because then people who are looking up some good old Jewish prophecies and what the ancient Jewish prophets were all about. Hosea is one of the ones that said that Yahweh is my God. And he was prophesying that if people didn't turn around and annexed themselves to the Tetragrammaton, the Adonai, the true Lord, well, then they were doomed for eternity. So that's not where we're going to go. So again, but it is a very long title, but it is what it is, because the titles are what we could say the more complex words that we're dealing with, the more complex energy systems and information systems we are talking about. And those of you who have investigated some of the other material that are dealing with the extraterrestrial races, you know that they have a specific way of communicating that is not similar to our neural networks, spelling, words, English language, mindset, or other systems, but they used to communicate with humans through symbols and via different kind of what we call icon-based or image-based language. Sorry about that. And as we see it in the ancient cultures. And that's where we're going to go today, because I've been pondering a little bit upon, I've said many times, I wanted to talk about the chakra system. And then I kind of shelved it because it was not time. But it is time now. And why do I put it here and not in the whole Academy free lectures, where I've done my take on Buddhism the last time a group of some of the ancient races took off and gave me the insight of what they felt was needed to give humanity today before they took off. It's called a giving over when groups are leaving. The reason why I'm choosing to do it here is because although Theravada Buddhism and the original ideas of the white Syrians, because that's that group they belong to, have spread around the globe, it has not spread to the same degree as the Kundalini and chakra ideologies, because of who has promoted it. Buddhism in its what we call more obscure form or more secret form were definitely part of the teachings of Blavatsky and the Theosophical community. They are also built into the Alice Bailey material, although the Tibetan there is actually more alluding to this within Christianity, which is an interesting mix. So we can question whether or not he actually is let me correct that one. I just got that one in. He's using that one because that was his last manifestation inside this reality, as in the Buddhist reality, so to speak, in a sector within ancient civilizations that we now understand as Tibet. And that's why he called himself the Tibetan. It has nothing to do with Buddhism. Okay, we got that one cleared. So with that understanding, I'm here talking on behalf, it's a giving over, and I have agreed to do that, but I'm always doing it my way. It's not channeling. It's not me just, it's like sitting in a room with different groups of aliens, extraterrestrials that are showing me imagery of what they want me to translate and transcribe into everyday language before they take off. And they are choosing to do this because there are still groups out there that have to complete their fourth cycle energy work that is connected to the ideologies and the ideas of the chakra system. And this is where, and I've had that in my mind for years, actually since 2016, when the old world order and the colonizing races began to take off and leave. They have done this given over. It's been part of my job here as well. And I have chosen to Most of the giving over has, of course, been related to myself and my own work and my remembering of who and what I was, as in they have given over what truly belonged to me, so to speak, as in the understanding of when I entered somewhere in the 1950s, my original energy system got chopped up and divided amongst these groups, which then used it for different types of replication and genetic modification engineering programs. But that's a whole other level that I don't want to go into here. What I want to go into here is that what they want to share with me and what I can give to you. And I think I'm embarking on that one because it's twofold. First and foremost, it would end what I kind of promised many times. I always said, yeah, I'll talk about the chakra system. I kind of promised that. I began with that. It's part of my books. It's part of the Source of Humanity, where I talk about moving beyond the chakra system because we need to do that. It's a full cycle piece of holographic technology, and it needs to put into some kind of context where we can work with it in present day and who and what we are now and what they need to complete and what the ideas are and all of these kind of things. And there's a lot of information, and I'm not sure I'm going to cover all of the complex patterns that are in this holographic transfer of information, but I'll do my very best. And at the same time, I'm also to provide some kind of context for those of you who are not really into the understanding of the chakra system. Many of you have studied bits here and there on the internet, but many of you have not really gone deep, understood the history of it, the background of it, who was actually behind engineering it, what was the purpose of engineering it, and onward and so forth. And we can start saying it goes back to that group we call the Brahims, the ones that are adhering to the god Brahma, and the understanding of the universe as a cosmology where humans were the microcosmos representing the macrocosmos. And that's why I'm putting it here on the systemic energetic awareness, because this is where we move beyond from the individual capacities into the understanding of being an actor, a part of a very large universal structure where we are via the chakras connecting to the different levels and features of the Brahimian concept, that priesthood that came from Atlantis and moved to India and settled in the Indus Valley, and there created what we could call a teaching system to preserve the original ideas of some of the fourth cycle humans that were given the second chance in the reseeding after the fall of Atlantis. And that's how we are to see they were kind of lifted up, taken away. The whole planet underwent a huge makeover, literally, after the fall of Atlantis, because they had really built holographic networks to all levels of the planet that were now falling along with the fall of Atlantis, because Atlantis was not just an island or somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. It was the entire planet at the time, and that's important to understand. So the whole planet had to undergo a complete makeover, and it had different stages afterwards, and there have been different pocket realities where the last ripple effects of the Atlantean civilizations played out, and the last group played out some 65,000 years ago. And they were some of the groups that we have the groups that went to inner Earth, as you know of, and that just means they reverted to earlier stages of the Earth history that are connected to the 7 layers as part of the nether world, because these are the racial grids of earlier civilizations, of which there are 7. So if you kind of situate yourself in an earlier holographic setting, change your energy system, and use the understanding of how to travel amongst the nodal points in the holographic reality network, you can travel back in time, and by that go to earlier stages of our civilization, of the civilizations on our planet, and by that go to pocket realities that we would interpret as inner Earth. And when they typically have that idea that they would like to show us, if they show some imagery of where they come from, they typically show that they come from cave systems within our planet, which is what you could say if you want to go from an earlier version of our planet into the current version of our planet, how would you get in? You would use a gate system that would go into a cave or a cavern within the current version of our planet. Okay, so this is the understanding. That's the same type of technology that when you're seeing these crafts coming out from the sea, they are using the old gate systems that are part of our reality field. And more of these will open as we resume density one of the original architecture of our solar system. So that's how that's done. So it's not because, oh yeah, there are these pocket realities inside our planet. These are just access points from where they can move from a different type of reality into our current type of reality using these gate systems. So with that understanding, you also understand why with the whole ocean kind of thing coming up from the ocean, from the depth of the ocean, and all sorts of other mechanics that are connected to our reality, and the true understanding of the system that we are part of and how it is connected to other realities via these gate systems. And these are some of the what we call stargates, but there are also the holographic network gates that are within our sector, and then there are the ones that goes beyond our sector. That's the stargate. So there are these different what we could call it dimensions of our reality from where earlier existences still are prevailing and are still present there. And that's how we are to interpret the Nagas as well, because the Nagas are the remaining species of the Brahims. They used to be in human form. They used to belong to the Sirian A groups. They have spores, remains of Pleiadian genetics, because that was part of their reseeding. As a species, they have failed. They no longer exist within our reality. They are connected to specific groups within humanity that are their outer domain, outer reality, human physical projects. It's part of their re-engineering of creating a vessel that is operational inside this reality, while they are still existing in a pocket reality, which we would refer to as the fourth dimension. And if you feel I'm a little bit different in my language, a little bit archaic in my language, it is because I am here transcribing and translating what they're giving to me of imagery, and I'm here sharing it with you so you understand who and what they were. And I'm seeing images of how they look. Some of them were earlier situated on Venus. They are also called the Venusians within the planetary hierarchy. They are called the wisdom snakes. Some of them were part of what was called the Flame Lords. They have different groups within themselves. Some of them, as you have seen it in The Last Airbender, some of them were masters of manipulating air or water or fire or what have you. They were part of these groups. It's not accurate, but you can use that. That move is complete fantasy, but go with the idea of original civilizations that master different aspects of our reality field, as it were in the times of Atlantis, where different groups were created, from where they had different specializations, from where they transformed energy using the different dynamics and mythologies or methods of the solidified holographic matter type that were created after the timeline event, because that's where that group arose. They showed promises within the ability to transform energy using what we today would understand as magic. But it's not magic. It is the understanding of how to work with the holographic network within specializations that are using specific type of symbols that you can impose on different combinations of energy and consciousness, from where you can begin to transform the solidification of the original flexible holographic energy units. And this is enormously important, because that's the whole basic idea of the chakra system. And the chakra system were originally divided into these 4 groups, and don't conflate it with the Chinese 5 types of energies. They have metal on top of that one. We're here talking 4th cycle, and that group of Chinese that chose to work with that system of 5 different elements, they are of a later group, and that's connected to what we call Feng Shui and some of the other ideas, which I might tap into at some later point. But these are a different type of reptoid beings that works under a different master, and they also came from Atlantis, but they were working differently with the element of fire, from where they were able to work with what we call the mineral level, as in metal, and how to transform metal in alchemical ways, which actually led to the invention of firecrackers and gunpowder. But that's a whole other story. We're not going to go there. It's just putting it in there so you make the distinction of keeping your mind sharp within 4 cycle, 4 elements that are connected to the developmental program that's called the cross. And I talk about the cross in my book, Modern History. These are the old developmental projects that were instigated after the timeline event to develop different racial groups and their types of genetics to upgrade certain specificities, that's a difficult word, different segments, different, I don't have the English word for this one. When you have a holographic energy unit, it is not just a unit as a wholeness. It is a unit that is holographic, and it contains enormous amount of complex energy systems that can be unfolded from then that one holographic unit. So when you look into the holographic unit on its own right, as in one little item, you take that little round item or whatever it is, because it's technically formless, because the moment it gets a form, it is already coded. But the formless uncoded holographic unit that holds the potentials of all realities within it, all cosmologies, all cosmoses, all levels of reality is already imbued in that little holographic unit. They are spawned from the construction of the original universal cycle. So the original energy units before the timeline event had the ability to be conformed, as in put together and formed into new versions of itself, where different segments of that holographic unit were chosen to develop certain properties and certain possibilities when you imbued consciousness upon it. And that is done by meditation, that is done by visualization, that is done by giving it its pattern when you look at it. That's principle 3, what you focus on, you give energy, and what you give energy, you participate of. So that's how we work with principle 3 on energy units themselves as a raw energy unit. We make it ours by imbuing our consciousness structure onto it. When you understand that, you begin to understand the foundation of meditation and the techniques that the Brahims brought with them. We hereby have some very important levels of information that are difficult to put into boxes, which I know many of you would like me to do. So you kind of say, oh yeah, that's that box, and then you understand it within that box. But you can't understand this as a box knowledge. This is a process knowledge. This is a dynamical, systemic understanding of how holographic energy units are conformed and changed into our usage and our utilization by imbuing certain symbols and certain types of energies that can be formed within what we understand as sound and colors and imagery, from where we can take control of that type of energy unit and make it ours. That's the basic idea of what we understand as magic. But if you then take onto it and understand you have 4 elements that have 4 different properties, the Bailey material talks about this as well. And you have what we call water, which is typically in astral, seen as the astral energies, which Carl Gustav Jung also talks about the subconscious as an astral field, Akashic record, if you like, planetary, already coded energy units that goes with the vibrational field. That's water. Then you have the what we call air, which is technically fire, and that's where most people get a little bit confused, because they always think that fire is something that is in its own right, and it is in a manner, but air on its own right is actually the holographic units as they are, because they're connected to the mental field. But they only become what we call manasic, or types of mental field energies, once they are connected to fire. And that fire is part of the biofield. And the biofield is where the chakra system takes its foundation. That's where it has its first, what we call etheric blueprint as part of the holographic network. And these chakras, as they are in the biofield connected to the mental field, they are a composition of fire and air, where air are the holographic units themselves, partially and connected to what we understand as the radiation field. And that is where energy, when they are transformed through different types of vibration, where it is amplified using some of the other elements. And I'm here not taking earth because earth is the molecules, it's the physical form. And that is what we want to transform. We want to transform earth using fire, water, and air. That's the whole idea. And you can go in and say air is the limbic system. You can go in and say water is the peripheral nervous system. And you can go in and say fire is the central nervous system if you like. And these are also important concepts to understand the biology of the ones that have a chakra system, because their energy fields are connected to these different layers of their energy system, meaning in the etheric field or the biofield. So let us just put that one in clearly here and now. The etheric field is the same as the biofield. And that is where you have the holographic architecture, where the biofield is your individualized type of code system that allows you to have DNA, that allows you to produce molecules and matter and have a physical form which you exist within. But that one is confined, again, put together, find within a specific framework of the element holographic units you have got from your parents. So that's the parental, what we call confinement of their biofields are what your biofield can be produced of. And I talk about that in the transformative energy system courses, the transition sciences as well. And that's enormously important because that determines the ways that your central nervous system works. It determines the way your lymphic system works, and it determines the way your peripheral nervous system works. The peripheral nervous system is connected to the heart. The main field it's connected to there is the heart, and that's the vibrational field that goes with the heart field. And I talk about that as well because I studied these materials a long time ago, and I work with that in my work of transforming the chakra system into what we could say a present day understanding of what it is. So I already work with it. This is not new information, and that's why they have given me this information over the course of time, because they knew at some point they would have to pull out, and then they needed someone to seed in the remains of the original teachings as a giving over, as it said, so that they could clear their connection points to this reality, and in the manner letting me translate it, and with that technically connecting it to my field from where I can choose to whatever I want to do with it. But those of you who are listening to this and that are part of the original civilizations that were part of the reseeding after the fall of Atlantis, that went to India with this group, you are the ones that are getting this information. You are the ones that are supposed to activate by this information by getting the correct level of understanding of what it means to work with the chakra system. The rest of you out there that have studied New Age, that have studied New Age spirituality, that have looked up the chakra system here and there and are looking into all of these beautiful rainbow colorations and what have you, not understanding what you're dealing with, you are technically and not the target group of this one. As with the Buddhist teachings and my giving over on that one was to say, well, here's the last piece of the information for those who began and took part of these groups within our reality field under these different holographic energy systems to try to continue what we set out to do as part of the reseeding after the fall of Atlantis. And I want to stress here that I was not part of that project, to be honest. I was not in this system at all at the time. I was somewhere else. But it was instigated by one of the members of my lineage, and therefore it's easy for me to connect to what he put in motion, and by that understand some of the things he promised these groups. And thereby, that's one of the reasons why when I returned, they saw it first and foremost as an attempt to try and revive the remains of him by using my genetics, which didn't succeed. And when that didn't work, well, then we began a whole other journey together, which I did not choose by my own free will, but this is how it goes. So when we're talking, and I just want to put that one in so you kind of get that when we are in this line of work, we're not always doing what we want to do. Sometimes we have to do something that is necessary to get to where we need to go. And these are some of the opposition dynamics I talk about in the psyche as energy, the psyche as balance, and the psyche, or keeping the psychic energetic balance, where we understand we work with oppositions of energy because it's an alchemical process where you transform energy. You might not remember who and what you are, but if you work with something that's similar and transform that, from that, you will have a byproduct that will activate levels in you that is because you get what we could say 30 or 40% of your original engineering to working with something that is very close to who and what you are. And again, as I said, they chopped up my field, and this is them kind of giving back what is mine and giving a sort of excuse. But as always, these groups are service to self. So they will always give it with a hook, with a catch, and with a package. And I am here just unveiling and unzipping that package. And then I'll leave it there. And then I've done my part. And I have no longer something rumoring around in my energy system as a task I need to complete to continue my own progression journey. It's there and it's in the way. And until I dealt with it and transformed it and done what the package is supposed to do, because it holds different types of symbols and is connected to different types of cubes, well, then it will continue to be there. And if I don't do anything about it, it will eventually create distortion. And that's the idea of the giving over, because many of you have been given what we call falsified versions and distorted versions of the original purposes and probabilities that the holographic chakra system were giving these groups of people that went to India as the foundation of the first civilizations that existed in the Indus Valley. So we are not talking about present day groups within India. Many of these are migrants and travelers from other systems in that area, as we are. So as the entire Mediterranean, Asia, India, whatever continent on the planet, we are no longer what we call within our original lineages. We have traveled so many places on this planet, and we have lived so many different lives. So we cannot no longer claim to be of this or that racial group within the reality as we know of it. We might be born in India, but that's because we have some kind of what we call unfinished business in terms of what we understand as karma, as something we need to play out within that jurisdiction, or are under certain types of contracts, which then forces us to be born within different sectors on our planet. Okay, so now you kind of understand that we are talking about the original construction behind the chakra system, and we are understanding the translation of these symbols and sounds and ways of working with. When we do the original chakra teachings, you will understand that in that in the work with this, there has been many different conflations. And again, I'm using they love the C word apparently, conflations, where again, you have something that's been put together and then it's been inflated by something else, been taken over, it's been assimilated by something else. That's the conflation. It's kind of merged with something where it doesn't belong. And that's the understanding of the black snake I will return to later on, because Carl Gustav Jung talks about that in his Psychology of Kundalini, which is a book I read many years ago, along with other stuff I read at the time, where I'm trying to get to the bottom of what was that. And you can say, why was I put on that weird research journey? Well, that was because the Nagas showed me the path of understanding the chakra system, so to speak, and led me on an investigation journey where I studied the different groups that have worked with that in the beginning of the 20th century, in the earlier years of the 1900s, alongside with my studies, my deep studies of the Alice A. Bailey material, because I found that to be most in alignment with what the way I could work with it. I studied the Blavatsky material as well, but that was just it was too obscure, it was too unprecise, it was too archaic, it was too naive, it was too everything. And she was from Russia, so clearly belonged to certain groups there that had a specific purpose of putting out something that were put in a specific way. The Tibetan always says, well, Blavatsky was first ray and Bailey second ray, and therefore Blavatsky was... She had a purpose to cut away through all the distortion, and her teachings bear a resemblance of that distortion because that's what she talked about. Whereas Bailey was second ray, so she was love, wisdom, and that's a combination of what we understand as the different groups aimed at what we call the, and the Tibetan puts it together and say he has different terminology. He calls it Christ consciousness when we do it within Christianity. But when we do it within Hinduism, it is called the higher self, or when we do it within his concepts of reality as a cosmos, he calls it the solar angel. And that's the mid-level of that's the soul level where our soul develops from being connected to the body, aspires, lifts itself up, and becomes the solar angel, becomes the angel of our solar system, becomes the one that floats into the middle domain, as I call it, becomes part of the original energy system that is the architecture of the consciousness construction, that the solar angel, the Agnis Swatar, the one that is made of fire, will rise itself up as a firebird, flame all of this out, lift its complete field of energies into its highest potentials, from where it will blast through all of the layers of the cosmos, transform these, and reunite with the original causal body, which is the original architecture. And you can, those of you who are looking into my teachings, you see, oh yeah, that's the same. You're actually saying, yes, but I'm saying it in a different way. I have kind of embarked on the journey of translating the ancient teachings into something we can understand in our civilization today, and the work that we have to do now in the completion cycles. And it's important that we have a language for these ancient teaching systems, and are not, as I studied many of the ones that studied the Blavatsky material also here in Denmark, and I was doing actually lectures in the Bailey material. I was doing lectures in that in the theosophical communities, and we're talking about this, translating that into some kind of understanding using peripheral nervous system, using neurobiology, and all of these kind of things, which I also talk about in some of my material when we talk about the ventral, medial, frontal, cortex, that part of the frontal lobe that is in the middle of the forehead, is similar to where the Ajna is positioned. And it has, when we talk about the guru systems, the teaching, the Ajna chakra is positioned there. And that is where we connect to our higher self. And the higher self is the one that makes us aspire to move beyond the animalistic man, the animal man that is not in control of his soul potentials, to use the Tibetan terminology, that is lingering around, driven by desires and low levels of human emotionality, all in his under the devices of his lower nature, instead of aspiring, opening the heart chakra, opening it up, unfolding all of the greatest potentials of what a human can be, lift up to the soul, because the only way you access the soul is through the heart chakra, which I talk about as well, but in a different manner. And then the way to go there goes through the activation of the frontal lobe of the Ajna chakra, where you understand the dualism of who and what you are, not in the Cartesian, the way that Descartes told you that the pineal gland were the seat of the soul and the rest were matter, or what have you. That's not what we're talking about. As in kind of soul and matter are two oppositions. That's the Cartesian way of saying these dualism way of that body is one thing and soul is another thing, and they are not intertwined, which is what the Bailey material talks about, that it is intertwined, and we are intertwined via the different systems, the different fields we are composed of, via the different organs, the central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, the lymphic system, that are connected to these different fields, that are unfolding different energetic properties within our physical form, and are igniting our form to function the way it does. And that's what the chakra system is all about. But it has higher layers as well. And that's the journey of the ones that are working with the chakra system. That is to, first and foremost, gain control of the physical form, but the control you gain is not to become immortal. And that's important because quite a lot of the gurus that were doing this, they, in their attempt to get control of the physical form, they did encounter the black snake. But that black snake actually is some of the remnants of the Atlantean projects that I would allude to certain groups that we now understand to be part of the reseeding of the groups of Egypt that utilized a specific type of Atlantean magic that created the black snake or the cobra. So that's a different type of snake. But to go back to the Nagas, and I'm talking in circles here, so this is a very complex lecture for many of you that are not accustomed to work in complex processes of information that are called patterns of information, where I work with different nodal points in each and one of the fields of the information, the layers of the information I want to convey here. See it as a holographic image where I have the whole picture. I know what I'm supposed to say, but I'm unraveling that holographic imagery, that holographic pattern, one piece at a time. But then I have to go other places into the holographic pattern to get that information that technically is behind that nodal point I'm trying to unveil for you, so you understand, unzip the content of that holographic pattern, of the units it's made of. And each and one of the units have, in spite of their connectionness to the wholeness of the pattern they are part of, they have their own inbuilt pattern, like a kaleidoscopic pattern that, all depending on how you twist the kaleidoscope, will show you different features that are connected to different parts of the holographic imagery I'm trying to teach you here. And that understanding is important when we talk the chakra work, because the chakra work is about learning to go through the different layers of your physical fields into the etheric field, the biofield, the vibrational field, the mental field, the mind field, and expand that one out until you understand the complexity of your energy system that is behind your physical form. And the best way to go through, as in the understanding that as when you're doing the neural network in your brain, you have the dendrites that have these different, they have the long tentacles or the tentacles, the long spores or arms or little weird things that are growing out of it like an octopus. And then you have the center point of where you have the nucleus of the dendrite. But the matter, that's just where you have the DNA and the coding of the dendrite of your brain. But the whole neural network expands out from the physical brain into the rest of the body, following the spine, following the central nervous system, that goes from the different processes of the brain until the tip of your finger, in your epidermis, in your skin, in all of the cells and all of the things that you are made of. That is orchestrated from the processes of the brain. So that's one large system, the central nervous system. And I advise you to look up anatomy here and understand, do some studies on the human anatomy, neurobiology, as well as how you are combined and composed, because then you will understand more clearly some of these ancient techniques, because their language back then was, of course, different. The language of the practitioners of Kundalini Yoga have a language of symbols, a language of what we could say it's created in Indian language, in the old, what is it? I forgot the word. Pali language. That I think that's Tibetism, or the Buddhist language. There is I forgot the word. What is Sanskrit? Sorry about that. It's in the old Sanskrit language that were the language of the priesthoods, and they weeded. What do you call it? Woven, as in kind of when you put things together as a carpet, a blanket. You take all the threads and you put all of that information into a tale. You put it into a narrative, a story, where it's interwoven into that story. So only the ones that understood these versus these different stances, as the Tibetan calls it, these different secret teachings, would understand the sayings, the analogies, as we have in the Gospels, the parables, the ways that it was explained, will understand what it's about. And the only way you understand that is if you have the double awareness. So this is the lock and key to the ancient teaching systems. You are not to look at it with your neural network, human conceptualization of ideas. You are to unfold the information, the context of the information in these stories, where you are taught certain things similar as we are taught about the demigod Heracles. Sorry about that. It's very difficult, some of these things, because I want to do it in the Greek word and you English people, you have translated into something else, which is annoying, just to put it in that one, as Aristotle instead of Aristoteles, and you call it Plato instead of calling him Platon, which is his accurate name. So this is a little bit annoying, to put it mildly. But anyways, just to put that in context, I'm sometimes are confabulating, because I am having difficulties in translating the original languages into the English language, which is part of the distortion of the English language, unfortunately. The joint language of the world is highly distorted and highly confined into very narrow, limited usages of the original languages, which is the purpose. Okay, so when we talk about this understanding of the complex systems of what we're dealing with, we are here putting together all sorts of information systems to understand what we are dealing with, and in that attempt try to upgrade it to present day words and present day concepts, so that we still understand that working with the chakra system, if you choose to do so, and if you are part of that old lineage that goes with that group of Syrian A's, and you are to connect to these wisdom snakes that are fourth dimensional hybrid, without a form. They are snakes with wings. I don't particularly enjoy these groups. They leave a lot of distortion behind, because in their time as part of trying to direct that group within India, which we would understand as the Rajas, the nobility of India, they slipped and they began different types of projects, which we would understand as military projects that led to experimentation and trade off to different groups that they should never have connected to or have become part of. But that's the typical story of the different groups within the old world order. And eventually they lost their ability to have human form themselves. And then they connected themselves as in a symbiosis with the ones that were doing the chakra teaching systems or chakra system teachings. And they became the quote unquote higher selves for some of these people and pushed out in the vicinity of the original energy system, the original higher order energy system capacity, and the original consciousness potentials of the original owner of that energy system that were originally connected to that physical form. So they came in pushing out the original soul and took over and pretended to be the higher self of that physical form. And that is their transgression, and that is why they are no longer going to be reborn, so to speak, within the next group of races that are coming in and are taking over India. They are now leaving that part of our planet, and they have tried to migrate to the West as part of the new spirituality teaching systems, and they have not succeeded in that either, because you then got the other Syrian beasts and their military projects. They ensured that the original chakra teachings were not given correctly, but were given in a distorted version on the internet, so that those they were trying to get connected to would then get what we call the Syrian B version of it, which is also part of some of the later teachings that we have had that have come from the hand of the Syrian bees. So you're seeing the factional war of information and the factional war of activation potentials. So with that little introduction, you hereby understand it's not because I'm saying, oh yeah, thumbs up, this is the best ever. And you now begin to understand why I have made my own version of the same ideas, because it doesn't matter if you're talking Syrian B or Syrian A or the white Syrians or the Syrian Cs, which are technically some of the groups behind some of the grays, or whatever you're talking about. We understand and remember from the book Souls of Humanity that the timeline event was instigated by scientists in the Syrian system. And that's why we have all the Syrians here, because they are paying off their transgression and their wrongful decisions. And many of these different groups of Syrians have lost the ability to be in physical form inside this reality, as it was taken over by the D10 collective of these different groups of Niburians and Dracos and what have you. And then they were forced into the fourth dimension, but they were still stuck here due to the original holographic technologies, the original holographic energy systems, which were then their punishment were to be this pariah that was an energetic parasite that were not allowed to have a physical form on its own, which we are seeing in many different of the groups that once the Dracos came in some 15,000 years ago, they took over, and that was taking away some of the civilizations that actually were a part of what we call the planetary hierarchy, part of that group of extraterrestrials that were managing the controllers, technically managing this reality field and what was going on here. And you also know that the last ice age ended some 15,000 years ago, more or less, give or take. And then we have that type of humans we know of today. But there were earlier human projects, there were earlier types of attempts to seed in some kind of organic vessel that would continue what we understand as the attempt to undo the effects, the solidification that came of the original flexible holographic units after the timeline event. This is the whole purpose, to change this physical form, to change this physical reality, to reset our solar system constructions to its original holographic properties, and not the densification here meant as in becoming more dense and more solidified, that type of matter that we are struggling with today. And the incoming groups from the lunar system, the lunar scheme, did not help either, because they brought with them different types of molecular structures that added on to the end of this system, to put it mildly. Okay, so we are here dealing with, even though the Nagas call themselves the wisdom snakes, and continue to do their planetary hierarchy as part of the councils there, as part of the Shambhala councils, trying to continue their work, although being pushed into the artificial fourth dimension and creating more and more distortion, because this physical form were engineered differently due to the alterations done by the Dracos and their different types of hybrid technology, which led to the incoming of groups and races that did not belong here, ending in the high peak of different types of Orion imbued races that came in the 1950s into this system. And that was the first nail in the coffin of this system. It had already begun. The coffin had already been built. There were a lot of bodies in stasis on other levels of this reality, but there was still a chance of transforming if only people would awaken. And that's some of why I studied the Balaam material, because they instigated the planetary hierarchy, did their last attempt in the beginning of the 1900s, 1910 to 1959, where Bailey died. They tried to create these original teachings, come out with information, but it was difficult, because humans on this planet had been conditioned so deeply into deviating from the concepts of having control of your body, your energy system, and your own divinity, into pushing all of that into different religions and different governmental systems and different types of ideologies and what we could call societal governance that were given over to some of what we call the hijacking races of that were working with the Dracos as overlords and a different type of controllers, nobilities, I have so difficulty with that word. The aristocrats. There is different actually there. If you go into understanding the nobilities or landowners, whereas the aristocrats are of what we call royal lineages, bloodlines, whereas the nobility technically were some of the warriors or some of the soldiers under the Roman Empire that actually got land. So there is a difference there if you look up historically into these background information of the different groups on our planet. But all of them worked under what we understand as the Baal, the Roman Empire that dates back to the Mesopotamian projects, and some of the other groups under the D10 collective. Okay, so that's another part of history. But let us continue in the next podcast and end this one. Thank you.